Hello and welcome to the BA News Show, your weekly news show every Friday at 5 with your hosts, me, I'm Rich, and Tabs.
Greetings, BArcadians.
Lots to talk about this week, so without further ado, let's just crack straight onto it. Tabs, what have you been playing this week?
Ghost of Tsushima. Still, Tsushima. Tsushima. Still headlong into that.
Yep.
Moving on to, well, people know if they played it, the third area now. Currently ruining my experience to try and record footage for an upcoming gaming workout video. Still thoroughly up there with the 8, 9 out of 10 for me if I was to give you a snapshot review. I was worried stuff would become samey in it. It is to an extent, but not as bad as I thought it would.
Okay.
You know, I'm seeing the flaws now more than I did at the start, but there's still so much I enjoy about the gameplay that keeps me coming back. Rich, let's throw it back over. What about you, my friend?
Much the same. I've just been playing Ghost this week. Not anywhere near as far as you. I would say I've probably, now maybe I haven't played similar hours. I've not played that much this week, but played a lot when I was away last week because I took my PS4 with me, obviously, as you do. I'm loving it, mate. Really enjoying it. Some hard bits in it, ain't there? We've decided to play on hard mode, and there are some tough bits in it. Really tough bits in it.
Specifically the jewels, isn't it? We've been saying the difficulty spike. It's up a cliff, isn't it?
Crazy, isn't it? It's mental.
So, but yeah, we're also looking at planning something in terms of a Jules video. So
yes,
stay tuned for that, BArcadians, if you are struggling like we have been.
Yeah. So let's move on to the first story. So PS5. This week we saw some sort of leaked, I would say, photos from what appears to be the PS5 or a PS5 factory where parts of the PlayStation 5 are being manufactured, and it basically shows what we're calling swappable side fins or swappable side plates. Whether they are in fact swappable is up for debate. I think a lot of...
We should say it's alleged as well. It popped up on a Chinese forum and then got spanked over onto Reset Era.
Yeah.
So we don't know if this is legit or not.
Yeah.
Take it with a pinch of salt. But it looks convincing.
It does look convincing, yeah. And you sort of think someone's gone to a lot of trouble if they've tried to fake it, because it looks like a genuine piece, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And obviously the pictures that have been released have got various markings on them, so you can't see what factory they've come from, which I thought was clever because obviously there's no traceability there. But yeah, so these look like they could be interchangeable. I personally am of the opinion that they aren't interchangeable.
Engineer's hat on.
The little lugs that are on there, they look to me like they're like location, like pins almost. They look like cones to me, like small cones, and they look like they would basically form into something that's already on the case of the PlayStation with probably some bonding agent, some glue or something, and they will just be held in place. I personally don't think the mechanism for getting it on and off, if that's what it is, looks like it's to be taken on and off.
Robust enough to withstand.
You look at phone cases, you look at lots of things like that where you can remove covers and stuff. They're just not designed like that. So I would have thought they've either designed something incredibly out there that we aren't expecting, or it's not interchangeable, which is where my current stance.
So you're saying that basically it's just a cheaper way, without using screws, to form a bond between these plates and the main body of the console?
Well, the trouble they've got is how do you attach them and have no visible fixings? The whole of the outside is aesthetically seen, so how else do you attach them? I think, well, they're either going to clip on. I don't think they look like they're going to clip on and off. Otherwise, how do you get to the lugs to then take it off? And it doesn't look like I would expect a phone case to be, where it like clips on around the outsides, because all of these lugs are inboard. So I'm sceptical now. I was really on board with it, but now I'm thinking maybe this is not a thing.
And to be fair, we have a bias because we really want to have interchangeable fins, because we're not that chuffed with the white design, which could be forced upon us at launch. But we did just mention skins and decals these days are quite sophisticated, so we might have a backup option if we do have to lump it with the white one.
And it's interesting because I would say I want a black one, but then if someone said, oh, there's some navy blue ones available, or there's some dark burgundy red colour I really like, I would be like, maybe I don't want black, but I don't want white. So that's the weird thing. So it's interesting. We'll have to watch this with bated breath. I mean, the
shout out to RB1985, by the way, who asked a question, didn't he, about what we would do. Would we buy a white console at launch if our hand is forced? And the consensus was yes.
Absolutely. Obviously, we would do.
We can't wait.
Yeah, that's it. You can't not get what I want.
We'll deal with the living room eyesore if it means playing PS5 at launch.
Anyway, move us on, Tabs.
So, second story of this week's BA News is a game that has taken Kickstarter by storm. So, I think I'm pronouncing this right. Eiyuden Chronicles, 100 Heroes. So it recently hit Kickstarter. It's essentially billed as a spiritual successor to a cult classic RPG or JRPG on the PlayStation called Suikoden.
And at this point, I'd just like to say I've literally never heard of this game.
Yeah, I mean, it is very under the radar, but I remember renting it from our local games rental place at the time. I never really played it through, but I loved it. I did fall in love with it. The way it was written, the way the RPG mechanics played out, it was fantastic. Now, Suikoden, I think it has quite a long series, maybe up to 5 titles, don't quote me. But the first 2 are considered to be the best, I think, entries in the series. So anyway, with that cult following behind it, not surprisingly, it smashed the target. I think last I checked, it was up to $2.2 million, into multiple stretch goals. And there's 30 more days left of funding, maybe 29 now, I'm not too sure on that. So yeah, suffice to say, BArcadians, I've gone on and I've ordered a physical copy, I'm backing it. I mean, you've got to be careful these days with Kickstarters because there's never a guarantee you're going to see the game at the end of it, but if you read the blurb, there's a lot to say, to back it. They sound very responsible, they sound like they're taking a very wise approach with it in terms of all of their workings with different publishers behind the scenes. So I would go.
Isn't the Kickstarter on this, excuse the pun, that the original people who were involved with the original game are back?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why it's got so much buzz.
Yoshitaka Murayama and Junko Kawano. Probably just absolutely slaughtered their pronunciation of their names, but yeah, this is it. They were at the helm. They've come back into the fray with a number of other talent as well in terms of music, just across the board. What I would say is go and check it out on Kickstarter. You'll see Rich has fantastically put this graphic together for us of a combat demo, which is on that Kickstarter page. That signed and sealed it for me.
I mean, it looks outstanding, doesn't it?
This is it. It's like a mixture of sprite work with 3D, a 3D engine, and it just for me made turn-based combat seem super dynamic.
Now, my only to pour some maybe water on these flames.
Don't you dare.
My only thought for that was the last thing you backed on Kickstarter, which also had the original people involved in it, was Shenmue 3.
Yeah.
And what was your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I've not played it through yet, and I will do. I will get around to it. People did say they liked it,
okay.
But it didn't do much to move the series on.
Yeah, okay.
But I would say that the scope of that game was very ambitious on a Kickstarter budget, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Even now. So this one is sprites. Maybe the scope's slightly narrower. Maybe it'll have a better.
In fairness, completely different type of game compared to the cult following that Shenmue had. So I don't think you can necessarily compare them. However, I just tread with caution. That's all I'm saying.
Rich isn't backing it. I think that's.
I've literally never heard of it. So why would I? I've literally never. I mean, it looks amazing.
No. Word of caution. You're right in saying so. It could flop very easily. Now, another little quick tidbit just to mention before we move on to the next topic is there was something in the press, in the gaming press, has been made of the fact there was mention of a potential next generation Switch or Nintendo console coming out. Now they've aimed for a release window of 2022, and in it there is some words to suggest they're expecting that to be a transitional point for a next generation console.
Interesting.
Whether they're just referring to the launch of PS5 and Xbox Series X on the horizon and that 2-year window perhaps for some people who haven't yet migrated to the next gen, or whether they do have some insider knowledge about a Switch 2 is up for debate. At this stage I don't think we can make too much of it, but interesting nonetheless if you are eager for a Switch 2.
Well, I mean, we spoke, and I will just very briefly say this, we spoke at length that Nintendo are going to have to do something to stem the onslaught of the next generation from PS5 and Xbox Series S, albeit they are different horses for courses. But yeah, I mean, it would make sense that there's something in the pipeline, so we'll watch that.
And we're so far underwhelmed as a twosome on this channel, aren't we? I think we're safe to say, with Nintendo's recent showings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Move us on though, Rich.
Absolutely. And I'm moving us on to, I think, did we mention it? Was it last week or the previous week? No, I think it was last week, wasn't it? That we were less than impressed with the Halo in-game footage that we saw at the Microsoft conference, which was, I think, like last week, or yeah, it was last week while I was away.
As was Alex, our subscriber.
Absolutely. He actually claimed that it was like a redone 360 footage, which speaks volumes. And we just thought, we saw this online during the week and saw this comparison basically between God of War, obviously a PS4 title, and the Halo footage that we've seen, and we've all seen this like grunt that everyone seems to be jumping on. It seems to be on everybody's thumbnail at the moment. But if you compare those two images, they're both from apparently in-game, and there's no comparison, is there, Tabs?
No, I mean the texture work is just miles apart.
Absolutely.
And the dynamism. Well, Alex Battaglia from Digital Foundry did a piece recently, basically suggesting a lot of the issues are to do with lighting, with how flat the presentation looks.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we may have found out, Rich, a bit more as to why it looks so rubbish. Sorry, Xbox fans.
Absolutely, and to be fair, I would just like to say that absolutely graphics aren't everything. Lots of games out there that aren't the prettiest to look at, but they're so much fun to play. However, moving into next generation, that's the one thing everyone wants to see. They want to see that generational leap in the graphics. And obviously, at times like this when we don't get hands-on with games, the one thing that we got
that speaks volumes
is the graphics. So that's one of the reasons why everyone sort of jumped on this, and it's been such a big trigger thing for everyone about.
And Microsoft haven't been shy, have they, with like talking up the performance and capability of the Xbox Series X. If they hadn't have done that, maybe it would have been a little bit easier on them. But this is their flagship title. And Rich, tell us all.
So it comes to light this week, and this is through a publication on Reddit. A user collected opinions from alleged 343. They're the people that are making Halo, industry alumni, basically. In essence, people who have worked for the company, in essence. Now, we have no way of knowing whether these are disgruntled ex-employees, maybe people that are laid off. We have no context to the things that they're saying.
Could be all made up and they just want to cause a stir. But
this is the thing, when you dive down to it, there was lots of things in these testimonials about old technology, the engine being absolutely riddled with problems and patches and fixes all over the place, to the point where I think one of these people who was interviewed said it needs a ground up rework of the engine because it's that patched, it's like a patchwork quilt.
Yeah, a kludge of different bolt-ons, which is just not functional.
And it seems like there's just so many things going on here, like there's people, a majority seemingly from what these things were saying don't specifically work for the company as an employee. They're a subcontractor, and because of that they're not particularly invested in the game, and they're there to get the Halo name on their CV, to say that's what one of the things said, and they're not really too bothered. All they're bothered about is just doing their code. They're not invested in the product, which is a worry. Lots of other things came out.
Internal communication, that's something that kind of was a big one for me, that basically suggesting it was everybody working in 343, because you say it's a big mixture of more long-term employees and subcontracted outsourced teams. They all use different means to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to kind of find out what that person is using before you can then get in touch with them. And there was talk of cold calling employees across the team to understand things. It just sounds so disjointed.
Absolutely.
No team cohesion.
There was something said about emails. So you might email somebody, and you might have to include a multitude of people, and then you're just getting bounce backs from these people, and you just end up with like 50 bounce backs from people like I'm in the office or I'm on holiday or whatever, and that's obviously not great for working things. And Yeah, it's worrying, and I think there's stuff about management maybe mismanaging things and just, well, that's the goal, that's what we've got to do.
Not close enough to it. I think they were saying that the leadership itself, I think it almost suggested that, like, yes men who were just, dealing with the higher ups in Microsoft and not doing enough to protect their employees, to provide the right tools for them to do a good job, investing sustainably, instead just worried about the next deadline. It all smacked of a headless approach.
Absolutely, and then there was talk of, I think one of the people said that the office is so crowded, it's like working in a corridor, there's people moving around all the time and it's very difficult to work. I think one person even mentioned that they had to go to a completely separate building to use the toilet because there were so few toilets within the building they worked in. I mean, no, I get there's a make, do and mend approach to lots of businesses within the world. We do it a bit where I work, but this is a gaming franchise that makes millions upon millions of pounds, and you think some of that investment surely must need to go back into the infrastructure of the business to ensure that they can keep their employees happy, everyone has a good working environment, and yeah, I think
we were talking before, weren't we, that this is perhaps, for me at least, can't speak for you, Rich, let me know what you think in a minute, but emblematic of Microsoft's approach to development in recent years. We saw when the first Xbox came out, they were pretty strong, they had some great offerings. Since then, I don't know, for me it feels like there's been a bit of a rot within their leadership and their approach to, at least their first party studios. You compare it with the likes of Sony PlayStation, which they seem to have a real tight grip, and they're investing, like you say, in the right things, in tools, in making things developer friendly, in having a sustainable brand. Whereas with Microsoft, it just seems like there's a cultural, you put it beautifully, a systemic issue in the way they develop games, which is, what we're seeing in the output of games like Halo Infinite. And I just find it shocking in itself that nobody had the courage to stand up to, the top odds in Microsoft and say, listen guys, this is not ready to launch as a trailer. We're not going to get this out at launch. This is not, the quality is not there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the people went on to say that it needs a ground up reworking, and that it shouldn't be a title that's launching at launch because, as in at console launch, because it's just not going to be ready and it's going to be a disappointment, and it's a massive franchise that potentially could see some serious downwards trend in its its prowess within the industry.
Yeah, the reputational impact of it losing its credibility. And they've also come out and said that it has like a 10-year, this is a platform for like a 10-year plan. I mean, at the minute, it's going to need 10 years to get it looking anywhere near as
good. And I guess ultimately what we're saying is Halo, the footage we've seen does look a bit ropey, but this information that's come out from 343, which could all be propaganda, of course.
Yeah, we should take it with a grain.
The thing I would say though is, from what we've seen of the Halo game, this sort of marries in with what we've seen. So these problems that they're having with development, the problems that they're having, it sort of suggests that's why we're seeing this game that perhaps doesn't live up to what we were expecting.
And let's talk about Xbox and the console war in a second in a bit more detail as we move to the next subject, which is Xbox Series X is apparently the best next-gen offering according to Gabe Newell. So Valve co-founder Gabe Newell, he chimed in with his opinion. I think it was on some sort of TV show recently, basically suggesting that he thinks the Xbox Series X is the best console to go with. So how much of that we should take, I don't know. I don't know if what his exact background is and if he's got kind of brand loyalties there. Certainly, in some respects, we think it's the most powerful console, but I don't know. I think there could be some favouritism there from his point of view.
I mean, interestingly, don't they make PC games?
I suppose, I think they've broadly got a background with PC games and working on PC architecture.
I saw someone put, I think it might have been Spawn Wave maybe, had said, like, that's fine, but just why are you having an opinion on this? Because you make PC games, so like why? So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't necessarily say that's the thing. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinion. I struggle to understand why he's come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
That's for me.
I don't think it was backed up in any real, powerful sense when he did make this claim. So take it with a pinch of salt, Arcadians. But as ever, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the subject. And just to give us a bit more complexity to the console war, we actually took some quotes from a Metro article with a few, I think, just random writers into Metro, just representing the public. And we were going to read through those, were we, Rich?
Yeah, let's do it, mate.
Do you want to kick us off with this one from London in Metro?
Certainly, mate. Microsoft don't have the games, but they do have Halo, which I still think could be good, and they do have the money, so they could make sure the Xbox Series X
or S,
or whatever it is, cheaper than anything Sony's got. Adding Game Pass, and I do think Xbox is going to be value for money choice for next gen. And we were actually just discussing this prior to filming, that it's almost a guarantee that the Xbox Series X is going to be marketed cheaper than the PS5. I think they're just going to wait for PlayStation to say how much it is and just go cheaper. And obviously we've already established with heavy rumours, although it's not matter of fact at the moment, that the Series S is going to be significantly cheaper. But this person goes on to say, but is that enough? It's pretty unexciting to be looking forward to a new console just because it's cheap and you get a bunch of games you don't necessarily want for free. Mm-hmm. So I sort of see what he's saying there. I mean, if you're going to look at AAA titles and what looks incredible, the PlayStation 5's got games sewn up at the moment, I think. We're still yet to see more offerings from Microsoft, but certainly from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll read you this out. This was Simundo in Metro. Microsoft emerge? It's a new one on me. Microsoft deserve much of the criticism they receive. Their next-gen messaging is as muddled as the Tories' COVID response. All political. But with Game Pass, they're getting it right. It's clear that it's central to their future plans and they're putting everything behind it. Beyond the perfectly reasonable yays and nays regarding subscription models, I've nothing but praise for how hard and well Microsoft are working in making Game Pass a desirable product. But putting out a ropey demo for the most anticipated game for next-gen console that looks like a current-gen game after saying you built the most consistently powerful console, then revealing it's running on a PC, is an old build 5 months before your console is expected to release. Well, I've no words. So, I mean, we'll cut it short there. I think essentially, we were saying, weren't we, before we filmed though, Rich, that, Sony have this very focused approach. They have this smaller net, quality branding in their first party offerings, and they're really, I think they're going to take the lion's share of the market, to be honest. And Microsoft, almost in response of that, perhaps because of these problematic development cycles, are taking like a catch-all approach. They're going to expand this net across Games Pass, Project xCloud, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, we think, PC architecture as well with their, kind of software approach. But the problem is, in doing so, you're trying to cover so much area that you're diluting your own output, your first-party output, which, I mean, whether it's going to work or not, I'm not sure. As the people here point out, is the Games Pass going to work out? Sure, it offers great value, but is it offering those killer experience that you're really after as a gamer? This
is it. And we actually spoke briefly before we started filming about the fact that Sony seemed to allow their studios to have almost free reign. Like, you look at Hideo Kojima, he was allowed to make Death Stranding, which is very much his game, very unique game, and he was allowed to do that. I feel like Microsoft would have said, no, that's not mainstream enough. We need to pull you back into the fold here and get you a bit more mainstream on that. I feel like,
not as bad as Ubisoft, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. So yeah, let us know, Barcadians, what you think to the whole console war, the different business models we're seeing from Sony and Microsoft. I think there's so much to say on it that we should probably do another video at some point just solely on what we expect to see. Obviously, we want to see both Sony and Microsoft coexist, be successful.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of the day, as gamers, we just want to see great games.
Absolutely.
And great services. So, fingers crossed, but it's a strange one, that's for sure. But Rich, do you want to move us on to the last?
Absolutely. The bottleneck of Ubisoft's creativity. Now, isn't that interesting, Tabs? It was only, last week or the week before we discussed how Ubisoft's games were becoming very beige, weren't they? They were starting to become a bit samey. There wasn't like bold and dynamic like we were expecting from Ubisoft, and it's interesting now that it comes out that Mike Laidlaw, the well-respected designer of Dragon Age video game series,
he was essentially directing a game that was codenamed Avalon, which was supposed to be like a big King Arthur and his round table sort of tale. But yeah, essentially this chap called Serge Hasquet, I think it's pronounced, who has now been sacked. He was one of the guys involved in all these allegations of misconduct.
Oh wow, I didn't realise that, okay.
Apparently he had a bit of an iron grip on the kind of creativity pipeline at Ubisoft. So yeah, it just strangled the approach.
Yeah, and current and former Ubisoft developers have basically said that he rejected lots of ideas with great potential, alienated high-profile employees, and he massively limited the company's potential to have like unique IP. And I think it's very interesting that I wonder whether what we're currently seeing is some of the fallout of that era across the games that they're currently making. And I referred to it as very beige. Well, that's sort of what it is at the moment. It needs someone with some, and we've literally just touched on it just now, someone that will go out on a limb and go, you know what, that's a bit out there, but let's make that game. That could be an amazing game, and not be very much run of the mill.
I think you need to have guidance when you're making these creative decisions. You have a brand and you want to shape it. You want to make sure you're headed in the right direction. You not just have complete creative freedom, but at the same time, if you have one person who's seemingly with this chap, he was just almost arbitrarily making decisions based on his own almost prejudiced preferences.
Yeah.
So, oh no, female leads won't work. Apparently didn't really like fantasy games.
What?
And that was part of poo-pooing this Avalon game. So yeah, it just, I think that seems a bit short-sighted, and the hope is, I suppose, with this reform, restructure, perhaps there'll be more of a collective think tank that is the creative bottleneck, not just one person.
How can you have a creative officer that isn't interested in people being creative and wants things to be pigeonholed into certain categories?
As
that
per
makes
his view of the world.
literally no sense.
Yeah.
You would think a creative officer would have the most open mind ever. That they will look at everybody's ideas and then they'll go, oh, I really like that idea. That's really creative. That could be brilliant. Yeah.
He sounds quite narrow-minded in his vision. We don't know the chap.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's certainly, again, the puzzle pieces are fitting together as to why Ubisoft and their output has been a bit suspect over the years. But I feel like this has been a bumper edition of the BA News, Rich. Should we bring this one to an end?
Yeah, I mean, there was so much to get. To be honest, I was excited to film the news this week because I felt like there was so many interesting and exciting stories to be talked about. There's a bit of a buzz in the industry at the moment, and it's really cool. Some ways a negative thing, some of the things we're in from 343 and Ubisoft aren't great, but certainly with next gen around the corner, I'm super excited for the games industry moving forward. So that brings the news to a close. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you want to discuss any of the items that we've spoke about tonight, get down in the comments, and when this drops, we'll jump in the comments and talk to anyone that drops in there. If you did enjoy the video, definitely give it a like. It really helps feed into the algorithms and helps the channel. If you're new here, subscribe so you can see us next time. And I think that's all we've got time for. Another one for the archive.
Stamped and completed.